Imagine a journey, not just a simple trip from one place to another, but a journey that took a whole lifetime, an epic story carved into the sand and time. This is the story of an entire people, the Israelites, who walked under a bronze sky and on a fiery land, driven by a hope as vast and as old as the desert itself. Each sunrise was a new beginning, each sunset a shaky pause in an endless quest. This wasn't just moving, it was changing. 40 years of wandering in a harsh desert. 40 years. Think about what that means. That's long enough for a child to become a man, for a man to become old. It's forever spent facing thirst, hunger, the crushing heat of the day, and the biting cold of the night. The Sinai Desert wasn't just a backdrop. It was a melting pot, a testing ground meant to shape a nation, to test its strength, its faith, and its spirit. Every grain of sand seemed to whisper stories of survival and relying on God. In the middle of this tough time, a whole generation was born and grew up under the shadow of a promise. These children had never known being slaves in Egypt. Their only reality was the traveling camp, the taste of heavenly food, and the stories from their elders about a land they had never seen, a promised land flowing with milk and honey. For them, freedom wasn't being set free, but a way of life. And the promise wasn't a memory, but something they inherited, a future to achieve. And then the leader of this nation, the great leader, Moses, who talked with God like a man talks to his friend, the one who had split the sea in two and made water gush from a rock, is gone. His presence had been steady, a lighthouse in the desert storm. He was the lawgiver, the prophet, the guide. His voice had carried God's commands. His hands had done amazing things. His absence created a huge emptiness, a deafening silence that replaced the noise of 40 years of walking. Just before he died, he saw the promised land from afar. From the top of Mount Nebo, God showed him the vastness of his people's inheritance, the green plains, the fertile hills, the rich valleys. A beautiful and heartbreaking sight that he would never physically reach. It was the highest point of his life and, at the same time, his greatest sorrow. He had led his people to the very edge, but he wouldn't step through the door. His eyes saw the future, but his feet stayed stuck in the desert's past. His death marks the end of an era, a chapter closing, heavy with loss and uncertainty. The shepherd is gone, and the flock finds itself on the edge of a new world, alone and vulnerable. The sadness is deep, mixed with a clear fear. Who could possibly take the place of a giant like Moses? Who could finish such a huge task? But the time for sadness must end. The desert, with its endless sand and burning sun, is finally behind them. They can feel the moisture in the air, the smell of fertile earth. The landscape changes completely, going from the dull orange of the desert to the vibrant colors of life. This is the end of wandering, the start of taking over. But the destination, this land flowing with milk and honey, isn't theirs yet. The promise wasn't for an empty, welcoming land. It was the promise of an inheritance to claim. And this inheritance is guarded, protected, lived in by powerful people and scary kings. Before them stands a huge obstacle, a barrier not natural, like a mountain or a river, but made by people, a challenge to their faith and their strength. The first fortress in their path, the key to the Canaan region, the city of Jericho. Its name alone brings fear. It's one of the oldest cities in the world, a stronghold of Canaanite power and culture, protected by a legendary double wall. Its walls rise from the earth like ancient mountains, thick and impossible to get through, a symbol of complete power and defiance. For these traveling people, who have only known flimsy tents, the sight of these huge walls is overwhelming. It's settled, military civilization in all its scary glory. These walls are more than just stone and mortar. They are a statement. They say, "Don't come near. This land is ours. Your God and your promises mean nothing here." They show the physical proof of something impossible. How could an army of former slaves and shepherds, without siege machines, without experience in fortress warfare, hope to take down such a city? Common sense screams that it's crazy, a suicide mission. The promised land is right there, so close they can almost touch it, but it's out of reach, locked behind this impossible barrier. This is the ultimate test. After 40 years of spiritual preparation in the desert, here is the real-world test. Will their faith be strong enough to face the reality of stone? A new leader must step out of the old one's shadow, given a mission that seems doomed from the start. The people need a guide, not just a prophet anymore, but a general, a planner, a man whose belief can turn fear into bravery. It's then that God gives this huge task to a man. Joshua. He's not a stranger. He was Moses' helper, one of only 2 spies, out of the 12 sent 40 years earlier, to come back with a report of faith, saying that, despite the giants, the land could be taken. He saw the promise, he believed it, and he waited. His time has come. A man who must now lead his people not only to a new land, but to a new level of their relationship with God. Crossing the desert was a lesson in staying alive and being patient. Taking over Canaan will be a lesson in trust and actively obeying. But he must lead them into a new kind of battle, a battle fought not with swords, spears, or battering rams, because they don't have any that are good enough. The plan they will be given will go against all military logic, all human wisdom. It will be fought with faith, a complete, total faith, a faith that makes you walk around a fortified city in silence, blow trumpets, and shout, believing that stone walls can fall down before the invisible power of God. This is the story of how the impossible became possible, and how a promised inheritance became a reality they owned. We're on the JM Impact Plus channel, and don't go anywhere. Stay until the end, because it gets even more exciting. This old story connects with our own lives, our own walls of Jericho, those obstacles that seem too big to overcome. So, before we dive into this amazing story, take a moment. Like, subscribe, and share. By doing this, you help us break down digital walls and share these stories of hope and faith with as many people as possible. Get ready, because the walk around Jericho is about to begin. In the grand story of biblical leaders, some burst forth like thunder, their prophetic voices echoing through the ages. But Joshua's story starts differently. It doesn't begin on a stage, but in the quiet shadow of a giant. Joshua wasn't a prophet, at least not in the way we usually think of it. He didn't talk to God in a burning bush or get the commandments on a holy mountain. He was a servant. A word that our modern world sometimes struggles to value, but in this story it means learning, dedication, and unwavering loyalty. To be Moses' servant meant being his trusted friend, his helper, the reliable person who took care of the small things so the leader could focus on the big picture. Quiet, loyal. Every day for 40 years he did his tasks without a fuss. He learned not by trying to be heard, but by listening carefully. He learned not by talking, but by watching, not by leading, but by following with perfect obedience. He saw Moses pray for the people, stand up to Pharaoh, and talk with God like a person talks to a friend. Every miracle, every challenge, every choice was a great lesson for the quiet apprentice. He understood that true leadership isn't about having power, but about serving and obeying a higher power. This training in the shadows built his character. When the real test came, he was ready. He was one of the 12 spies sent to Canaan, and one of only 2 who came back with a report of faith, not fear. While the others saw giants and unbeatable cities, Joshua saw God's promise. His view wasn't shaped by how big the problems were, but by how great his God was. It's an unchanging spiritual rule. God picks those who have learned to obey before they lead. He gives power to those who have shown they are faithful in small things, to those whose hearts have been prepared away from public view in the secret place of service. Then the dreaded day arrived. Moses' death left a power vacuum and a deep sense of shared grief. The nation's rock, the prophet who had led them out of Egypt, was gone. An entire nation felt lost, on the edge of their inheritance, but frozen by uncertainty. Who could ever replace Moses? But God's choice fell on Joshua, not a prince, not a charismatic speaker, but the faithful servant. The man who had spent his life supporting was suddenly called to lead. Imagine for a moment. Imagine the huge pressure that fell on Joshua's shoulders. He had to follow a legend, lead millions of people, and conquer a hostile land. Doubt must have crept in. Fear must have whispered in his ear. Was he good enough? How could a servant fill the shoes of a prophet? It was in this moment of weakness and change that God's voice broke the silence. God spoke directly to Joshua. He didn't start with a command or a battle plan. He started with a promise, a personal and powerful promise. Joshua had been a special witness to the power that was with Moses. He had seen the waters part, bread fall from the sky, and enemy armies defeated by God's help. He knew where Moses' strength came from, and now that same source was promised to him. No one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. This wasn't just a simple word of encouragement. It was a passing of the torch, a special blessing, a divine guarantee. This assurance turned a servant from the shadows into a fearless leader, ready to face giants and tear down walls. Because he understood that his ability didn't come from his past experience or his own skills, but from God's constant and perfect presence by his side. The servant had become a commander, not because he had become like Moses, but because the God of Moses was now with him. Before them, Jericho. Thick walls, an unbeatable city. No logical military plan. Any logical military assessment would have concluded that a direct assault was suicide. But God said, I am giving you the city. God told Joshua to see a reality that wasn't yet visible to the naked eye. The promise always comes before the victory. This gap between what God says and what we see is the battlefield of faith. Facing the unyielding fortress of Jericho, God's strategy defied all military logic. For these seasoned warriors, used to the roar of battle, the divine command was puzzling. No swords drawn, no direct assault, no battering rams to break down the gates, just march. One time around each day for 6 days, a silent, disciplined procession, an act of faith in motion. Every step was a statement, a declaration that their trust wasn't in their own strength, but in the promise of the one guiding them. And be quiet. Silence was a powerful weapon. It forced each person to look inside themselves, to quiet their own doubts and fears before they could spread to others. This time of silence was meant to stop doubt from spreading and to help everyone feel united. It was a command to obey, to put human wisdom aside for God's plan. Obedience was their real weapon, and their silence a form of praise. Imagine the mind games on the people of Jericho. Day after day, this strange, quiet parade wore down their spirits. The unknown is often scarier than what you can see. Their trust in their huge walls started to crumble in the face of such strong faith. Then, on the 7th day, the instructions changed. Dawn broke with new energy, a clear sense of something about to happen. The procession would go around the city not once, but 7 times. The march sped up, the pace got faster. Each round increased the spiritual pressure, like a spring being wound tight before it's let go. After the 7th round, after a long and loud trumpet blast, that broke the silence of a whole week. The whole nation had to let out one huge shout. This wasn't just a war cry. It was the sound of faith set free, a shout of victory declared even before the battle was clearly won. It was the united voice of a people who had learned to quiet their doubts and let their trust speak. Joshua 6:20. So the people shouted when the priests blew the trumpets. And it happened when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, and the people shouted with a great shout, that the wall fell down flat. The walls didn't fall from the force of a sound wave, but from the weight of faith shown. They fell inward, as if the city itself couldn't stand God's presence at its gates anymore. Walls fall when faith speaks louder than fear. Joshua teaches us, faith acts. Obedience unleashes power. Victory is not human, but divine. It's not your shout that makes the walls fall. It's who you listen to before you shout. What walls are in front of you? Fear, addiction, blockage, past, keep walking. Trust. Obey even when you don't understand. The walls will eventually fall. Like and subscribe for the next part of the Unknown Origins of Israel series.